December 2 meeting of the Parks and Recreation Committee to order. And we do have a public comment, but I believe the person who's commenting is going to contribute those thoughts when we get to item number 4. Is there anybody else with us who would like to make a public comment? Seeing none, we can consider approval of the minutes from our November 4 meeting. Anybody have any issues, corrections, whatever? Motion to approve. Mr. Neal, second by scanning the crowd, David Nutting. Thank you very much. No issues. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed? Hearing none, motion passes. Thank you very much. And I guess we could start with Ms. Miller and then go into the discussion and possible action regarding, River Edge Parkway. Ms. Miller is going to do the soil testing in Riverside Park. Right. So we're going to hear from Mr. Sipple, who has been integrally involved, and I noticed his name was uppermost in the staff members who are responsible for bringing us this. So tell us what you've been up to.
Yeah, so before the committee in the packet is the draft, I guess the first draft of the update to the River Edge Master Plan. So the original reason that this plan was updated is because the first plan was done in 1995. So, you know, there's been a couple decades of progress made on it. We wanted to kind of take stock of that progress, reassess the priorities of the public, kind of look at what's been done and what we should kind of focus on moving forward, and dig deeper into the feasibility of some of the segments that have been that haven't been completed yet, that are current gaps in the system. So I'll just briefly overview the process for the plan, and then I'll go through some of the findings that were, you know, listed out in the full document in the packet. And then I guess the main reason bringing it to this committee is to take a look at the findings and the recommendations and see if there are any gaps that you feel like the plan has missed, kind of to get feedback from the committee members, any gaps that were missed, if the kind of priorities in your minds are similar to what was identified through the public process, and if there's any solutions that were not explored in the plan that you think you might want to look into further. So those are kind of, I guess, the three discussion points as we go through this. But just a quick overview of the process. The planning process started in 2018 with an RFP for services. And once GRAFE was selected, we started kind of doing the baseline data gathering and assessment in fall to winter of 2018. We had a kickoff meeting with staff and stakeholders in early 2019 spring. And that meeting was where we established kind of the vision and goals, and that was mostly carried over from the existing plan, the 1995 plan. And then we also did a site tour of some of the gap segments and existing sections of the trail. There were several public input events between spring and fall of 2019, looking at there was a stakeholder meeting during one of the Bike Ped Committee meetings in June. GRAFE had a station set up at the summer kickoff weekend to get, you know, public input from people that were passing through there. And then there were 2 open houses at City Hall in September and October that kind of showed their findings and were seeking additional feedback. The next step after that was to kind of identify some preliminary engineering concepts for some of the priority segments that were identified through that process, to get some initial cost estimates and determine the feasibility of those. So just a quick overview of some of the issues and opportunities identified throughout that process. You know, in river crossings in general, people had said that the existing bridges are not very friendly for biking or walking as part of the trail system. There aren't any real good loop options to get, you know, both sides of the river, the east and west side, and there are gaps on the west side of the trail that kind of make it disconnected. And then another big one that was noted was that the southeast side neighborhood on the east side of the city is disconnected from the entire river edge system in downtown. And then additionally, some of the signage can be confusing, and some lighting in some areas was seen as inadequate. So those were some of the kind of the assessments that for improvement that were shown through the public process. So that kind of resulted in several priorities. I think the biggest ones connecting along the river were shown and kind of shown on the boards here, that the connection to the southeast side to bring that into the river edge system, completing the connection from Winton Street to Gilbert Park. And if you want to follow along in your packet, most of these are probably listed on page 21. The two segments along MBX properties on the west side of the river and graphics packaging. So that's between, basically between the segment by East Bay and Pick and Save, and then the segment between Bridge Street and the existing River Edge Trail segment on the northwest side. And then so those were kind of the four highest priorities identified throughout the planning process for connecting along the river. Some additional priorities were identified in getting across the river. I think the highest priority short term was Scott Street and Washington Street, those bridges, because there is excess vehicle capacity on those. So bicycle facilities could be added relatively cheaply and quickly. And there's already sidewalks there, and that would improve the experience both for bicyclists and pedestrians by reducing those lanes there. And then there were also some other options explored, including a northern bridge, between Schofield Park and the Winton Street, and a bike ped bridge on that end that would kind of complete a northern loop segment. And then our other two, general purpose bridges, Bridge Street and Thomas Street, were also both identified as high priorities for improvement for the trail system. So, some of the recommendations that kind of came out of this, and these are mostly highlighted in pages 22 through 32. They looked at a side path along Grand Avenue for a southeast side. So these can be kind of broken down between short-term and long-term. So some of the short-term, I guess, they looked at improving the existing Prospect Avenue bike route as a way to just get people connected to the trail, even if it's not a part of the trail system. So that's kind of a short-term improvement. And then a couple options that they looked at for an actual trail connection, and that was a trail alongside Grand Avenue and a trail on the backside on the river there. And the kind of going through some of the engineering feasibility of that and through the public input, it was decided that the trail along the river was both more desirable and potentially more feasible. And I guess that kind of same process was looked at for some of the west side gaps, either having it lower down on the river on boardwalk or higher up on a path. And they kind of looked at both of those options. And then Winton Street to Gilbert Park, that one was actually relatively simple, but it did require a railroad crossing. So that's kind of, those are the options that they kind of focused on in the plan, and did some additional engineering feasibility on it. And I guess that's kind of where I wanted to stop and answer any questions, or dive a little deeper in anything if anybody has some part that they wanted to talk more about.
Anybody have questions, comments? Mr. Neal?
Do we have any outstanding private ownership issues that are seemingly in the way of any of the gap filling?
Yes, so most of the gaps, both on the west side and the east side, would require easements from private landowners.
Well, when I say issues, I guess I'm kind of like saying, do we see roadblocks, or do we see willingness to cooperate?
There's been, I'll just say, improved communications recently with some of those landowners. So they're, I guess, with the with the west side connections, there's 2 large landowners that need to be, I guess, on board with the easements, and then on the southeast side, I think there's about a dozen smaller landowners that would need to be on board. And in those cases, I guess there hasn't been talks with the landowners, as at least recently, as far as I'm aware, on that segment, but there have been ongoing discussions with the west side gaps. So.
I just would mention that one of the things that I always thought was going to be really simple would be the extension of the trail from Winton Street to Gilbert Park, but I was reminded that there's a railroad crossing involved there, and we know just how willing and flexible and helpful the railroad can be. So that's going to be a bugger. Any other thoughts? Mr. Nutting?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And looking at the trail topographies page, I think it's page 22. Would it be more attractive for the property owners on that southeast side for the lowest one on the right-hand column, the trail on the lower river shore, where, excuse me, where property owners may not be, have their view affected or have traffic, bicycle traffic, pedestrian traffic, possibly in their backyards. I'm not sure how the properties are aligned in that area, but that's my assumption. Thank you.
Yeah, so that was something they looked at when they were looking at the feasibility of that segment, is they kind of looked at options of putting it up, higher up on the ridge and lower down, and they kind of settled on a design that left it sort of higher up, but still, for the most part, it would be out of the view of those existing property owners. So it'd be on a section of the property that is not usable for anything. It's, steep slope. It would require a cut and some erosion control in order to put it in there. Whether it's more attractive to the property owners or not, it really depends on the property owner. Some people like to have a trail in their backyard, and we'll put a walkway right up to the trail so they can access it, and some don't want to see it. So it's hard to say which one is more attractive because it depends on the property owner, but both options were looked at.
It looks from the, I guess it's up on the screen, it does look like with the switchbacks, it does look like they're trying to get pretty low in that middle section.
Yeah, it's really steep there, so even getting it just a little bit lower requires, in order to keep it accessible for people with disabilities, it requires quite a few switchbacks even just to get it, slightly below the ridge. The overlay of the image is kind of a general routing. It doesn't actually show where it would fall on the ridge on the aerial photo there. And when they looked at getting it lower, there was some issues. It's possible, but there may be more issues with DNR permitting that might make it a little bit more difficult to do. So.
Yeah. And just for the committee's information, as far as I know, there has been no organized effort to begin contacting landowners or, I've made a little bit of noise about the fact that, we have a dotted line on a map now, but I haven't spoken to like individual landowners or anything. Mr. Neal.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In a similar vein, back to the Railroad Commission, at this stage of the game, since we do have a potential ask, have we reached out to them yet to see what their preliminary reaction might be?
Not on that particular crossing. We've had regular dialogue with them on several crossings that, are kind of on our radar as important, either for the trail system or just pedestrian connections in general. I think that one has been on the list, but because that trail segment hasn't really moved yet, it hasn't necessarily been prioritized prior to this plan. I don't know that that has been, really discussed, but it is on the, I think, on the list of kind of regular dialogue items, so. And the engineers that looked at this, used a crossing design that the railroads tend to like, in that it's a kind of a switchback, so it requires people that are crossing the railroad to look in both directions before they actually get to the tracks. And it's a design that they've used in other communities where you have to cross a railroad.
Would probably be good, I don't know at what point we would suggest contacting the railroad, but pretty soon, I would think, huh?
Yeah. And that's kind of the purpose for this plan. I mean, both when you, in talking to property owners and talking to the railroad, this actually gives us a concept that we can go and start talking to the folks that, would need to provide an easement. It gives us something on paper that we can point at and say, a vision, so it's not just, going out with kind of an idea of a trail, but with no idea how it would work, so.
So at what point does this document solidify a bit? Is it going to go to council for
So-
approval, or?
Yep, this committee, the input opportunity here was kind of the first standing committee. After this, the plan is to bring it to Plan Commission, probably in January, and then, because that gives enough time to incorporate any feedback, and then from Plan Commission to council is the current plan.
Good. Any other questions, comments on this? A lot of work went into it. I think for a couple of individuals who were not familiar with our city, they really dove in and learned a lot. So I think we're good.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Very good. There was a little bit of debate whether we needed item number 5 on here regarding soil testing in the Riverside Park area, but I didn't want to preclude any city or council, the committee sentiment as far as acting right now to implement, charge out and do some soil testing. I'm imagining that we are kind of pointed toward waiting for further results, and we haven't heard back from the DNR about Wausau. So, Ms. Miller, would you like to inject some thoughts before we dive in?
Sure. Thank you. Judith Miller, 903 Kickbush Street. Yes, I was operating under the impression, first of all, that you had received the DNR results. Sorry that you haven't. I also, as I'm sure you're aware, CCW's tests haven't come back yet, although they're expected shortly. I'd point out to you in your packet on page 59, much was made of Melissa's comments from the Solid Waste Department about testing of soil on Thomas Street. And I would point out, first of all, that that soil was never tested for dioxins, as the soil in Riverside Park needs to be. And second of all, that the standards for using soil in landfill are considerably lower than those designated by both the Wisconsin DNR and the EPA for soil that the average citizen in residential use or commercial use is going to be exposed to. I would not say that her conclusions about that soil are valuable in evaluating whether or not we need testing in Riverside Park. Finally, I would like to comment that often in this committee, we have heard people say, I believe there's no danger in Riverside Park. I'm afraid this isn't a matter of belief. This is a matter of science, fact, and truth. And in order to determine what contamination there is, we need further testing there. What you'll get back from Wausau is only one test, hardly sufficient to indicate whether the areas designated are in fact contaminated. I hope when CCW's test results come back, you'll consider them seriously, and I urge you to consider asking the council for more testing. Thank you.
Thank you. I was struck, and the stuff from Melissa Johnson and the landfill was something that I asked to be included in the packet. I was struck by the fact that the DNR said, boy, that's, pretty clean soil. You might want to just use it for planting purposes or something like that. So, and I also was struck by the fact that they didn't, as they moved that soil around, the concern was for the neighbors to have airborne dust and stuff like that during the construction period. So Mr. Lindman had it removed. So the concern was, would they be in any danger? And I believe what we found out was that that's was not found to be hazardous and was found to be suitable for the use it was. They ended up, I believe, using the soil as cover, so they didn't bury it and then hide it all. They used it for cover for other stuff. So I considered that to be good news. To clarify the comment about the DNR results, we have Waleco's submittal, but we don't have the DNR's reaction to that. That's what we're waiting for. So, thoughts? Mr. Giselman?
Well, I thought we were expecting those results in late October,
We
if not
were-
November.
It was going to be November.
Have we heard from Mr. Thompson at all explaining why these are not coming? I mean, because it seems like we're being, what are we trying to do here? It seems to me that month after month, maybe next month, we'll hear, I think that the citizens need to know exactly what we're expecting here of the park. And have we heard from Mr. Thompson at all?
I have not. And I haven't pestered him either. I haven't. Matthew Thompson, the DNR hydrologist you're talking
Right.
about, right?
That's correct.
Hydrogeologist.
Because
I
it
haven't
seems
heard
to me he
anything from-
promised something to us and,
It would have been mid-November, yes.
right.
So we're
And that's why we
overdue.
didn't have a report in November meeting, and now it's December, and we still haven't heard anything. It's just, there's a big question mark here, and I think that we need to be more forthright, and I think we need to, if nothing else, pester the DNR, because I think we need to know exactly what they're saying on this.
Would you like the committee to have staff communicate to him, asking for information as soon as they can get it?
I thought it was just understood that he would be reporting
it
as
was
soon
too.
as some kind of a DNR report was in.
There's a guy coming to the microphone who might
I can't
know
explain the
something.
reason why it has been held up, but I will get a hold of Mr. Thompson tomorrow to find out what the delay is so that you and everybody else in the city of Wausau can know what's going on.
Very good, sir.
Thank you.
Mr. Neal?
Yeah, I just want to interject that pretty much, for months and months, this committee has been very open to testing and asked for testing and, sent it forward for consideration. And that's been pretty much a constant coming out of this committee, regardless of what, this or that comment that might have been made in session of the committee. We've always supported going forth with any testing that's relatable to this park. I was a little concerned about some of the reportage we saw after the release of the state testing that, kind of positioned it as the city says the park is now safe, which that's not what the press release said, and that's not what we're saying. And as a matter of fact, I think our position remains that we want to sit and wait for the results of the citizens groups test to come, and then have that and look at everything else, in total, and then have a discussion about, is there a need to go further with testing, or are we comfortable? So that's where we are. I just want to have that kind of on the public record coming out of this committee.
Yeah, I think that's good to put out there. I was, in reviewing the statement from the toxicologist, I was again pleased, and I noted that they, again, like they did when they did their initial report in 2018 on the tests at the base of the culvert in Riverside Park, that they did base their reaction, they considered the levels of dioxin that they found, that Wausau found in the soil surface samples, and they applied that as if somebody was going to be exposed to that. Well, if it would be just a park user, it would be 105 times a year again. So, and a resident, I think it was five exposures per week. So they are, I think, very conservative and cautious, and I was pleased that the results were no worse than they were. Yes, sir.
I want to say thank you for recognizing that, because as it has been noted before, since we took over, we've paid more attention, listened to groups, listened to residents, listened to individuals, spent more time doing the right thing than ever before. Again, this is something that's been there for a long time. This is not just something that happened. And we have tried to work with these groups, and it's a little disappointing sometimes how things are brought out. But we are committed to doing the right thing. We have been all along, have been for the last 3.5 years, and will continue to do so. But I thank you for recognizing that, because unfortunately with regular media or even social media, somehow the facts seem to get slipped by, which is kind of a shame. So, thank you. We will continue moving forward in the right way. As to why we're not hearing stuff yet from the DNR, perhaps they're being cautious right now too and waiting to see what's happening. Again, we will do the right thing as we always have, and it has been noted. Did I get caught off? Okay. Come on, Jody, give me a break. So,
Yeah, I was pretty smooth on cutting the switch off there.
you show me how you do that, so, okay. Thank you.
Yes,
Mr. Chair,
I had another little point. Yes, sir.
I thought the DNR was just going to be, main task was to report on the illegal findings. I
Yeah,
don't
we
think
haven't-
that they were waiting for other materials to come in. I mean, I think there was just one report that they were supposed to give us a report on.
Yeah, they got the Wausau analysis, about 26 of
Whatever.
them or however, and they were going to react to that and make some
Right.
sort of a statement. And just kind of bouncing off what the mayor said, I think that the DNR is being very careful about what they do say. And one of the last communications I had with Mr. Thompson was that he said that a lot of people, including the governor of the state of Wisconsin, are waiting to hear those results. So I think they want to make sure they phrase it just right and have everything covered. Is there any sentiment to do anything at this point other than just support the mayor and, okay. Seeing nothing there, okay, we have some interesting educational items, I believe, including the one on vegetative invasive species. I noted that whoever assisted with the soil surface sampling or surface soil sampling of the CCW tests noted that they found some, what was it, Japanese knotweed or whatever it was?
Yep.
And so I asked Ms. Polly what the deal was on that, if we can go over there and beat that stuff up. And so she's going to talk about how we're doing that now, and we may in the future want to have a broader community-wide strategy, but you can hear from her.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As you can see in the educational items, I put a little written, it's an informal policy on how we deal right now with noxious weeds. We don't have a formal written policy for invasive species at this time. But as soon as we notice it, either our staff is out noticing it, they are aware of the different types that are out there, so they will report it back, or if the community member, or however it is noticed, calls in and we find it, then we go out and we assess it, and as I put in here, we do different types of removal, and based on the time of year too, we will remove it so that it doesn't spread further, if it's in seed and that sort of stuff. So we do mechanical plant removal, including hand pulling. We do cutting with some chemical treatments. We also have chemical treatments with appropriate labeled products, so we don't just make up our own. We have everything documented that we do. We also have specific chemicals that we can use in areas along the shoreline where it, has to be of a certain kind so that it doesn't go into the river. But to date, we've treated, invested time and resources into trying to control, now with invasive species, to try to get rid of them is very, very difficult because they keep coming back. So it's something we have to continue to do year after year. But we try to control glossy buckthorn, garlic mustard, the Japanese barberry, Japanese knotweed, purple loosestrife, Canada thistle, and tansy are ones we've had so far. Now you could go into a long list. I mean, even dandelions are really considered an invasive species and how we treat those. But these are the more invasive that take over greater areas. The buckthorn is one that, as you'll see out on Isle of the Ferns and Oak Island, and it'll be on Barker Seward Island, is something that year after year we've worked with the Golden Sands Conservation Group. They get volunteers to come out and they pull and cut buckthorn, and then they put a chemical treatment on it. But it is something that we continue to have to do year after year. You eventually get it down to a little bit, but all of those seeds are transported by birds and people, and so it's hard to get rid of all of them. But that is our current policy right now, our practice. So
Questions? Mr. G?
With regard to the use of Roundup, I know that is becoming quite, I don't know if we have a policy with regard to that, or how we use it, or if we use it at all. I think that's becoming more and more of a issue environmentally, and what is our, do we have a policy, or do we have a use of Roundup? I know that's quite, not only to human beings who are using it. Any comments, or do we need to put this on a future agenda or something? But I think we have to be sensitive to the use of Roundup in the city.
yes, and we are aware of that. Actually, Greg Fricks from our department did come and speak with a committee, Brad, I think you were on that committee, about our use of chemicals and Roundup. We do use it in certain areas. We also have other chemicals that we use. We have, the only people that put it on within our department are certified pesticide applicator. They have a special license, and they do it. They have to document everything. We have to post it when it's sprayed. It is something that we use. Like I said, though, there is other chemicals we use as well besides that. So although I can't give you details right now, I do have a pretty detailed explanation that I know that Greg gave to, which group was that? The State Sustainability Committee. So I can get that to the committee, and we could talk about it further. And we have our staff that does the turf management. That's his background, that's his profession from doing golf courses and stuff. We hired him specifically to do our athletic field, so he can speak to us to which chemicals are best in certain areas. We know too that there are some sensitive areas, like if they are along wetlands or waterways or stuff like that, that we have to do other treatment on. So we're very well aware of that. I can't give you specifics right now, but we do use it and are certified too.
The Sustainability, Energy, and Environment Committee did have a good talk from Mr. Fricks, October, September, several months ago.
Yeah.
Anyway, the only reaction that committee had to hearing what was said was to ask that a request be drafted just to make sure that as these chemicals are used near the river's edge, that, make sure they're taking full precautions and trying to make sure that stuff doesn't get into the river. I think if you'd like to hear it, we could put it on a future agenda. I think it's pretty interesting stuff, and the precautions they take and the licenses, certifications they need, I guess you'd call it. Would you like to have that? We had more on the, he didn't cover the turf part of it very much. We could add that.
I think that would be an interesting subject to have for our, not only ourselves, but for our public who views this in the future, and just to have something.
January?
It would be great.
Okay.
Thank you. And then was it not a representative of the DNR who discovered some of those invasive species along Riverside Park? Was that something he brought to our attention?
I think it was one of the people who was involved in the testing.
Yes, thank you. So I'll have to have them to thank for
I
that.
don't think it was DNR.
Our park staff, the full-time staff, educated in identifying these invasive species.
Yes, they
I
are.
mean, some of it looks alike. It's just so that they can keep tabs on that.
Yes, so as we're out mowing or doing park maintenance, they do look for that as well, and they'll report it back, and we'll put it on our plan and get it taken care of. So that's how we notice a lot of it.
Very good. So we'll have that in January. Anything else on that topic? Very good. Who's got the dog park special committee? That Mr. Neal is
Okay.
pulling on the leash to do that?
Okay. I put in here the update on the fundraising. The Dog Park Committee had a pretty successful fundraiser at Malarkey's on November 17th, where they raised just under $2,000. So it was a pretty good turnout. I was there the second half. Mr. Neal, I know, was there in the beginning of it, so you can speak to that. But we're currently, the group is up to $67,980. And that doesn't include the $20,000 requested from the CIP. So if that's included, we're just under $90,000. And with the wetness and the weather, you can see this, the fence is not put in yet, but I'm working with the fence contractor. They probably won't get it in yet this year, but we'll do it right there, ready to go right away in the spring. Engineering is helping us lay out the parking lot, and the water line will get put in right away. So hopefully we don't have too wet of a spring with this, thaw and no frost in the ground. But they're working at the end. I do know that the committee has some members walking with some informational items this Friday in the holiday parade as well. They'll be part of our flow for the Parks Department. So watch for them there. Do you have anything more?
Well, with about two-thirds of our goal having been met at this point, there was another area foundation that I had tried to apply online with, but they had IT problems, and they just kept saying, don't go there, it's a bad place. Finally talked to a person from that organization, and they've had their IT people supposedly fix it, and it's ready to rock. So here in the coming days, I'll be doing that application online. And hopefully that would take us over the $100,000 mark if everything works out well. So, and we continue, through the winter to find money where we can.
Any questions, comments?
Has
Mr.
there
Nutt?
been, has any of that 67+ thousand been needed to be expended already, or is it just in escrow?
Right now, it's currently in an account. We have the fence ordered, though, so that pretty much is spent, but we haven't actually paid the bill on the fence yet until that goes in the ground.
Very good. Keep on trucking, I guess. What have you got for project update?
Okay, project update. So we were making snow beginning in November at Sylvan Hill. Then the temperatures got warm, and we stopped making snow. With this snowfall that we recently have, it's helped, but we do still currently need to make more snow. We just don't have quite enough base, so they'll be working on it for an opening date of December 14th.
And could you add the grooming that's going to be done for cross-country ski?
Yes, at Sylvan Hill, the grooming will start either tonight or tomorrow. They were working this afternoon with the golf course to lay out the trail throughout the golf course, so that will be groomed for cross-country skiing within this week, as well as, even though it's not a county park or a city park, 9 Mile is groomed for cross-country skiing. Not officially open until the 16th after all of the hunting seasons are over, but the lighted loop will be on in the evening and the trails are groomed. So River's Edge Trail, we have the debris cleanup. We still have to haul some items away, but that's pretty much almost complete there. As you'll notice, we've got ice rink, warming houses out in the parks where we're going to have the ice rinks. We haven't made ice yet because we didn't have any frost in the ground. Now with the snow, that will help us do a snow pack down so we can get a base down and then start making the ice for those ice rinks. As time allows, we've been doing vista clearing. That was before the snow fell. Now they'll continue to do it in between having to clean up for the snow. As you'll see, our holiday trees are up. We put up trees and decorate them at the 400 block, the courthouse here at City Hall with the help of Public Works, and on the corner of Stewart and First Avenue. And then we continue our daily regular operations. The last week and a half have been snow removal operations, and then a lot of tree trimming, removals, and maintenance. With this snow, there was a heavy snow, so we had a lot of limbs down, some trees down that we had to take care of.
There were a little bit of, I guess, leveling and stuff that was done over at Tom Field. The rinks we're going to have are Tom Field and 400 block and Marathon Park?
Correct.
Okay, and indoor.
And then indoor, yep.
Okay. Any comments, questions? Mr. Nutting?
Please tell me where the vista clearing is taking place.
We have a list of wherever there's a bench along the River's Edge Trail, so it goes all the way from, pretty much from Schofield Park down. So I can get you that list if you're interested, and then they're just working down that list of trying to make sure that vegetation in front of those benches is open. We're also taking assessment of those vistas. We have the inventory now, but we're taking assessment that if a bench was put somewhere and now there's a really nice tree growing in front of it, we'll either adjust the bench instead, if we don't want to remove the tree, or we'll remove the tree based on what it's there. So there was quite a while where those vistas were put in, and then that was just a filling item that we got to when we had time, and so there was a couple of years where we just didn't get to keeping that vegetation down. We're trying to catch that. We have some funding available from the Community Foundation for that.
Yeah, it's good to hear. Those vistas were chosen in those instances because of the view that was there, and then invasiveness has
Right.
taken place. So the more that we can clear out there, the better.
Yes.
And
Nature happens. Mr. Neal?
Yeah, I noticed, back in fall, I guess, there was one of the vistas put in towards the north end of Wausau Chemical.
Okay.
There was a pad, a cement pad put in there, and, because I was going down there regularly in my mornings, and one morning I noticed that there had been an additional pad added, seemingly maybe for accessibility, so you'd have like a bench and then an open pad, right next to it. Is that going to be done along, to all the vistas, to have that feature?
No, it is not. I will verify why we added that pad there, because it was nothing that we really had in
Yeah,
the
I mean,
plans
because
to do.
the original pad was down, and it was days or weeks later, I was going by, and there was a whole new pad about 4 feet by 4 feet or so roughly.
Sure,
Right on the edge of it, just added on,
okay.
and I thought, well, there'll be a bench here and like
Yeah.
just a flat space here,
Yeah.
so. The other thing is, and we have no problems with clearing vegetation for those vistas, like, from the DNR or whatnot.
Currently, no, and especially if it's invasive species, which a lot of it is, then as long as we're following the procedures and using the right chemicals and stuff, then it's something we can do, correct.
Okay, thanks.
Very good. We're doing very well today. Future agenda items, we've got the pesticide, herbicide topic. Hopefully we'll hear something from Matt Thompson on the DNR's take on Waleco's information. Anything else? Pardon? Oh, yeah, okay. CCW? And I think, and I don't know that we need to, but after that comes in, we'll be sending that information to the toxicologists and asking for a reaction from that too. And I don't know if we want to wait for them to react, or based on the information they've already had, maybe they can turn something around really quickly and say, yeah, these are about like the other ones, or no, these are much different, or, so we'll try to make that happen. Be nice to have a decision on that. Mr. Nutting?
Back to the, if we put on a future agenda for the Vista opportunity, that we could work with the Wisconsin Public Service in clearing the growth that has taken place over the last 30, 40 years along the river, right by the hydro dam there. That used to be a visible, clear area where you could see all across the river, and it's all grown up with sumac and other stuff. And if that was on a private property of a homeowner, because it's right off the road, we would be fining that homeowner or business.
You talking off First Avenue?
First Avenue, South
Okay.
First Avenue. There's a great vista right there, and it's been, even the signage that the public service has put up about where fishermen should go is covered up, overgrown. And
Would you like
so-
that on an agenda, or
We
would
could
you
add
just
that
like
to the
to?
agenda where we would be in contact with WPS's publicity person.
Okay.
She's been here before, but I can't think of her name. Begins with a Z.
Kelly?
Kelly.
Kelly.
Zagzebski.
Yeah.
I believe we looked at this last year too, and we did address it with them, or we had the procedure of how to address it with them. So let me go back and dig through that to find out what we did then. And I
Yep.
believe maybe there just wasn't any follow-up, so let me look at that and see where we were at. I can
So now that
correct
there's
it.
an official bike lane on that portion of South First Avenue from Thomas all the way to Stewart, there's really not a good view, except slightly in the area where the new wall was put in. A lot of the shrubbery was removed to create the ability to build the wall.
Sure.
But
So the question
There's a
that
lot
you'd
more that
like
could be
her
done.
to address with WPS is whether more could be done to clear that vista
certainly
out.
more could be done. It's totally overgrown,
Okay.
and it has taken away a tremendous view of our river.
I'll look
good.
at what our policy is too, and who should be following up on making sure that gets done. Because I do believe we talked about this last year, and so I'll go refresh myself and
Thank
follow
you.
through.
Thank you.
Mr. Neal?
Yes. Well, after our great effort over the last couple of years or so on the Stewart Park column rehabilitation effort, I've had one of the neighbors ask me, what about the rest of the park? I've walked around it and eyeballed it. I'm not really a masonry, guru or anything. I know there had been some work prior, just in the last 2 or 3 years, of probably some tuck pointing along the wall, maybe at the western side. But will we be able to have some sort of an evaluation of the remaining infrastructure, the masonry infrastructure in the park? I know right on 10th Street, at the north end of the park, one wall is just kind of like leaning kind of cattywampus. It's been probably undermined a little bit. So just a general walk around and to see if we can isolate any problem areas that, could use some touch-up work.
Yeah, so this is something we'll put in, I'll put it on our list to put together as we put our CIP projects together. That's how we brought those columns forth, because it's usually a fairly costly item with the tuck pointing. But we'll put that cost estimate together over this next year as we're working on those cost estimates. And if it doesn't qualify for CIP, we'll bring it forward just as a project in our small project list. Otherwise, we'll bring it forward as a bigger project. Yes, we can do that.
It might just be something that we phase over 2 or 3 years and just say that, we're going to do this tier of wall here, and we'll do the next tier next year, or whatever, just so we know, what do we have on our plate.
Very good. And we do have a dangling matter that's your kind of reference to pecking away at things. I think we need to, we'll make sure that the funds that were taken out of playground funding are recovered after the finance director gets things settled out at the end of the year, so that can proceed. Anything else for, yes, sir?
Well, just carrying on with that, so that, I think that was originally budgeted for 75,000. You're talking about Forest Park?
Yes.
Yeah. The budget request was 95,000 for
No.
2020.
And then the 20,000, so,
So we need to get the 20,000 to come back out of year-end
so that's
surplus.
still working? Because I think the Forest Park Neighborhood Group would be interested in knowing that the full amount will be hopefully established for 2020.
The council directed that that's what happened, so I think we're fine.
And I've been in contact with Maria from the neighborhood committee to let her know that that's the discussion so far, so that's what we're
thank you.
hoping.
Anything else? Would there be the key motion of the evening? Mr. Neal has moved to adjourn, and somebody needs to nod. Mr. Smith, second the motion. All those in favor say aye. Aye, thank you, and good night.